We've talked a lot about development life cycles and fancy DevOps and even making the infrastructure better, but we haven't talked about some of the intangibles about making the overall code quality improved and getting everybody on board with QA. So let's start with the actual QA process. Rob spent a lot of time there. So what's the transition from, I think of QA always as automated, but in reality, most organizations have a manual process. How's the manual process get started, and how do you think through getting to an automated?
I think it's not much different from other areas where you go from manual to automated, and QA similarly. We write test cases, test suites, test plans, and from there, the initial execution of those plans are likely manual. They say step one, step two, step three, and with various assertions and.
So you're talking about the test, have the existing test cases that you're going and clicking your way through now.
Right. Yeah. All the test cases you create your test cases and based on requirements and the like, and the initial pass of those is likely going to be manual. You're going to start executing those things manual, and as you look at trying to automate them, you look at what's the tech for supporting the automation behind that. Do I use Selenium? Do I use something else? Do I, what kinds of tests do I want to run? Am I running smoke, regression, integration, load testing, things of that nature? And, how does it fit into the overall SDLC of, any application that you're looking to support?
So looking at the load testing, integration testing, all the different places where you can label it, which of those probably give you the best improvement on your code, your overall code quality?
Well, I'd have to say they all do, right?
It depends on the problems you're having, right? I mean, if your code is changing a lot, then maybe focusing on regression testing is where you start. If
do I have enough tests to support regression testing early on? Am I making that?
Maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah. Well, I mean that could be true. Yeah. Or if the non-functionals aren't specific enough, maybe you've got performance or load concerns. So, I mean, I think it kind of depends on what your situation is.
When you make the migration from manual testing environment to an automated testing package, do you end up with more or less tests?
I don't think it really weighs on the amount of tests, because the test cases themselves are still going to be written based on new features, new requirements, et cetera, or any gaps that you might have had in previous testing as well. The act of automating it is, my experience hasn't really shown an increase or a decrease in the number of test cases that exist as a result of you going from manual to automation.
Because I guess I was making the assumption that on a manual test case like the 20,000 that we have now, that you can't execute them all. So that when you get to automated, you are doing more, and then as you learn more, we should really test. What if I make the button blue? Does the same suite rerun?
So in that scenario, if I already have thousands of test cases that already exist, I'm going to start, and we want to make some headway on the automation front. I would look at the pool of test cases we have. I'd identify those high priority, high value test cases that will immediately provide value, things that we run all the time, frequently, and look at those as to start automating that. And maybe, that's 10, 20, 30% of the total test cases out there. And then from there, at what point do I run these tests? And do I run the full complement of those tests? So that's where we go back in the different types of tests. Am I running smoke tests with each build, with each code commit? Am I running full nightly regressions every night, just based on the most recent builds of things? Am I running a full set of tests in a production-like environment prior to release? This is where I say they all kind of go together in helping to improve code quality, because they all have different perspectives when at the various times that they're being run.
But on like the regression or where you run them each night as the build, another aspect that I think of is that the ability to seamlessly push code from dev, QA, stage, prod without manual intervention also has to be a pretty big bonus to code quality, because you get a lot more integrity.
Yeah, and you remove the human element from any of that process, and if we have tests set up to test a little bit as we go to dev, a little bit more as we go to QA, and more
Why
on
wouldn't
down
you
the
run
line,
the full set in all the environments?
because it takes time, right? So I wouldn't want to slow up the development process for a developer by each time they commit to a particular branch that runs the full complement of tests, because that may be minutes, maybe hours, maybe a day, who knows. I'd want it short and sweet. I want it to be critical to what they're doing, what the developer is working on, or that particular application or feature, as far as that far left process goes. And then as I move up the life cycle into QA stage prod, I might run, or I will be running, a little bit more comprehensive sets of tests. And that's where you get into the nightly regressions as well, because you can pick the environment that you're going to run it against. You have all night for these things to run. The developer's not waiting. You're not wasting time. You wake up in the morning and you have your output from those tests, and then you go see what failed and you fix it. But you want
data for those tests.
Data is something. It's tricky, right? You don't want destructive tests, certainly in a production environment, of course, but you want to be able to reproduce your data. You want to have the data itself should be commoditized, right? We want to be able to take that data and spin it up time and time and time again, so we can always start at the same starting line, and we worry about the finish line based on the outcome of those results. So if I run a nightly regression on a Monday and a Tuesday, but with different starting lines, different sets of data, am I really comparing apples to apples when I'm looking at the output of those test results? Probably not. So, my experience with various QA departments has been they manage the data, the test data that needs to be in place to support a particular test case, or they have help in doing so. But either way, that's a scripted process in some fashion to be able to say, I'm going to run this set of tests. I need this set of data refreshed in this particular environment. So when I run my tests, it's always from the same starting point.
And that's something we struggle with, especially when you need the complexity of production data down in the QA environment to run that regression testing.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of the concerns, certainly with data, when we're talking about production data that's either EMR or PII, PHI has that data, and you need that data to be obfuscated because you can't have it down out of production. And so what do? Well, you do your best to try and maybe bring that production-like data down and refresh it occasionally. But even then, is it right for the test cases that you're trying to run? We know from experience that no matter how many times we refresh a particular data set in a certain environment, that we can't test something because we don't have all the data there, or the data is not set up to execute a particular test case. And so something makes it out of that environment and advances to the next step in the life cycle, ultimately gets out to production, and there's a bug because the data does exist to support it out there, and it failed, right? So we rewind, we fix, we put it back. But data is a key element in what we do as far as testing.
Because that avoids the happy path.
Right. Yeah. If the data is there and it's going to break things, the happy path is broken, and we want it to be broken, right? We want to catch these things as far left away from production as we can earlier in the process, so we can fix it and not have it actually get out into production.